In pelvic health, we have some of the most complex cases walk in our doors. The clients who have seen every doctor, tried every medication, and worked with multiple pelvic PTs are still in pain. As providers, it can feel like quite the pressure to be the one who finally figures it out. Yet often, what is really needed is not another new protocol. It's a new way of relating to the body, one that honors the nervous system, the emotional landscape, and the energetic story that lives beneath the symptoms. In this episode of Pelvic PTs Gone Wild, we are talking about how to approach challenging cases through a somatic and intuitive lens. We explore slowing down, deepening history taking, building real trust, and using our own grounded presence as medicine.
Welcome to the Pelvic PTs Gone Wild podcast. We are your hosts, Dr. Tara Morrison
and Dr. Ryan Simmons, and we are not your average pelvic PTs.
We are here to strip down pelvic health to its bones. Way more than Kegels and peeing your pants, we are here to expose the deep well of vitality that's available when we think outside of the box.
From woo to taboo, somatics to sex, we are shaking it up and getting wild. Our mission is to inspire us all to remember that beyond searching for the best evidence, treating the symptoms, and seeking a quick fix, healing is a profound and creative act.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's nice to be here doing podcast again. It's been quite some time.
It has been, yes, necessary time. You've moved. You now are in California,
Yep.
back in the States.
Yes, I'm surrounded by pine forest now instead of palm trees. It's been really nice, though, to be back in the States and grounding into some work and talking to you about running our mentorship program again. And I'm excited to think about doing that again at the beginning or kind of spring of next year. Not sure yet, but I think coming here today, talking a little bit more about
Challenging cases and how we can, as pelvic floor therapists, somatic based and alternative and pelvic PTs that have gone wild, and we aren't just in this straight and narrow medical system. How do we really address and approach these challenging cases with all of the tools that we have, and also in a way that's really in service to what they need, especially when they may be someone who have seen multiple providers, have been to multiple doctors, were not the first physical therapist or pelvic floor physical therapist that they've been to. Where do we start with these people and where do we go? That's what we really want to talk about today, because I feel like this is a really common thing among pelvic health providers, especially. And it's something that we all run up against, because the more challenging a case is, and the more someone's tried to receive support in the past, but maybe has not gotten where they want to go. Maybe they're still having pain, leaking symptoms, whatever that is. It can often make the provider feel pressure to perform, pressure to figure it out. But also, I think this is where moving away from the traditional physical therapy viewpoint of looking at the body as muscles and structure becomes even more important, because the likelihood is they've already seen a few providers that have already done that. And that's the thing that's not actually working. And so there's an invitation here for more, right? But this is often where, as pelvic PTs in a traditional Western medical setting, often feel afraid or feel like maybe they don't know enough or don't have the skill set, or it's not within their scope to really step outside of that. And obviously, that's what we're here for, and that's what we're all about. But that's the direction we're going today in our conversation.
Yeah, and I think it happens to us a lot because we often end up getting referrals with patients that have complex cases because they often don't respond to pharmaceutical care. Sometimes there won't be quantitative things showing up on MRIs. So you may feel like you're in like a ton of pain, but the diagnostics just don't show that there's anything going on. And that can be really scary and confusing for patients, and it can be really intimidating for PTs, I think, because you've got all of these really well-trained medical professionals throwing up their hands like, I don't know what to do with this. And then you're supposed to figure it out. And I think that some of us, a few of us, and there are so many patients that help people manage chronic pain and chronic conditions with like magic and ease. And I think that we're like a certain type of PT that's like really like up for this challenge and is really interested in understanding why. I think a lot of us are, it's like that, just that scientific method that's like deeply inside of us that's just always asking questions. And I think, Tara, you and I, we just happen to be those PTs that when faced with something challenging, even if it's a little scary, and I think this also has to do with treating patients for a period of time. We've both been PTs for quite some time now, so it feels like easier to be more confident. I also think being mothers brings us into a position of confidence. Being in long-term relationships with our partners brings it like we're entering more of this like post-mother virgin crone kind of part of our lives where we feel like a little more safe experimenting and holding patients in the fear and in the unknown. And that adds like this beautiful element of calm and calming your patient, calming yourself, and working on developing trust that things might take some time to uncover. It might not, that nothing's going to be a silver bullet or like some magic, but that with a little bit of trust and a little bit of partnership, that we can actually come to understand some of these complicated patient scenarios. And often they are deeper inside of the body and have elements that are outside of the physical realm of the body that we need to identify and bring to the fore and to talk about, which is the tricky part, right?
That's where, as a practitioner, you have to have the confidence in a skill set that you've learned that is outside of the traditional. And I know that's part of why we offer somatic pelvic arts. That's why we created that. That's why we created our mentorship, so that we can support PTs in learning tools and ways to work with their clients' nervous systems and to coach them in a way that helps them uncover and work with emotions in a way that they weren't taught in school, and to help them feel confident doing that. And so if you don't have some sort of other training, then that's definitely going to be more challenging. And I have seen there are more and more PTs and pelvic floor PTs going into more alternative modalities, integrating energy medicine, emotional work, nervous system work. I do feel like there's a shift happening. There's something important that you said that I want to go back to, and that is recognizing that there isn't a magic bullet. This isn't going to be a quick fix, and that it is going to take partnership, and it is going to likely take time. I think so often this is part of, I think, getting real with clients, especially clients that have more chronic conditions, is often in the medical system, they're like going and the doctors are like, let's try this medication, let's try this shot, let's try this. And all of those are really some form of seeking a quick fix for a solution that has been there for a long time, and that is probably not just a physical manifestation of an injury. And I don't know the exact percentage, but, or if there is an exact percentage, we know that a large percentage of chronic health conditions and even physical body pain originate in the emotional energetic field of a person, right? So it's not even, it's something happening in your energy field first before it even manifests in your body as physical pain. And
Or there's a physical issue first that becomes emotional in the way that you must deal with it.
exactly.
In like in the case of trauma, sexual traumas, or even in the case of breaking your foot and then not being able to take care of your children, or like this massive disruption of your lifestyle, And then when it doesn't heal in the way you think it's supposed to heal, so like chronic UTIs might be a good way to come to this. So it's yes, you might have a bladder infection and you might get antibiotics in the beginning, like when you're 18, and it might go away. But then those bladder infections keep coming and then they mean something more. Most of the time, they mean if I have sex, I'm going to get a bladder infection. Then they become intertwined with your partnership, with your sexuality, and they become this big ball of thread. And Kimberly Ann Johnson talks about this in terms of nervous system work. They become this big ball of thread where everything feels like it directly relates to the next thing. So pain directly relates to sex, for example, but you have to work with the system to pull those threads apart from each other if they've been balled up for so long. And so when you go to a doctor and you have chronic UTIs and they're just like, take antibiotics again, and you just get fed up. First of all, it's messing up your gut and whatever, and you get fed up and you go to a physical therapist. If the physical therapist is not able to relate, hey, look, you've had chronic UTIs for 10 years. There's more to this now than bacteria. There's more to this now than just like a foreign object. Now you have tissues that are holding. Now you have relationship issues. Now you have guarding in your pelvis every time you have sex because you think you're going to get a UTI, and then it manifests itself every time.
Or you avoid sex.
Or you avoid. And that avoidance creates even more guarding or more tension in the pelvic floor. Yeah. I forget why I went off on that example, but it just feels like in the pelvis in particular, there is so much of this relational stuff going on that has to be untangled because there are so few professionals that know how to treat these things from the get-go. So they're complicated for years and years.
And my question to that and how we got into this was that UTIs, say you have a UTI when you're young, right? That could just be, yeah, maybe you had sex and you didn't clean yourself well after, you didn't go to the bathroom and you had a UTI. I think most women have had that
Yeah,
experience at some point. It happens, right? Maybe it was purely that. But also, and especially as it starts becoming more and more chronic, I also think it's good to look at what else is happening in your life, right? Was that a good partner? Were you really stressed in that part of your life? Were you having sex in a way that felt good to you? Were you having sex with multiple partners at that time in your life? Were you working at a job you didn't like? Were you in school and overstressed? Do you have a history of sexual trauma? I think all of those aspects also go into that. And that's usually where if someone comes in with that history, I'm like, let's go back. Like what was happening in that time where this all first started? Because that is often where the answers live, not just what's happening right now. And it's so rare for a medical doctor to say, what's happening in your life right now, let alone saying what was happening in your life 10 years ago, 20 years ago when this first started, because that's going to give the bigger picture of the work that really may need to be done to support this person in healing. And then, yeah,
I think that's a really good point. Even if you just wanted to take just a little tidbit or tip home, it would be to deepen your history taking and to really allow for the time and space that it takes, that perhaps your entire initial visit is just history taking with maybe some hands-on holding of the pelvic bones or some sort of like comforting, calming, nice feeling energetic work at the end of that session, more than how we were trained, which was to take a quick history, ags and eases, pain rating, then get into your range of motion, get into your muscle testing. There are so many patients where I don't even do hands-on internal vaginal work for 3 sessions because I may be working on just calming their nervous system. A lot of times people come in with such anxiety when they're coming in with something they've had chronically, and especially around their vagina or their vulva, it's like super stressful. It takes a lot to build trust. And so one tip is just slow down. Don't feel the pressure to do some hands-on something at any given time. It is totally up to you and your intuition when the time feels right. And you may just benefit but the patient by not doing that.
I've even made it almost a policy every once in a while if it feels good to the patient. And I will do internal on the first visit, but in all of my forms, I state that internal isn't done on the first visit just to set that expectation. Because I agree. It's like, that's such an intimate part of the body. And we really need to build that trust. And there's so much that we can do to support the body, to work on the nervous system. Because if the nervous system's toned and you go in and you do a pelvic floor eval, one, they could have a negative reaction to receiving that. And two, that's going to influence what you're finding, which I guess someone might argue that don't you want to know what that initial tone is like before you do nervous system work? But to me, the safety of the client, their comfort, and building that trust is way more important than knowing that exact baseline tone of the pelvic floor.
And a lot of times, I think by now too, we hear in history with symptoms what is a hypertonic pelvis versus what is a hypotonic pelvis. Like for me, I can listen to a patient describe their symptoms and guess with about 90% accuracy what their pelvic floor is going to feel like when I go in there. So that's also something, just trust that you probably know and you can work with something and it's not going to be harmful, especially if it's not hands-on and we're not providing pharmaceuticals or anything like that. I just wanted you to, Tara, just to give a couple of examples of what might fill some space or time for you when you're not doing hands-on work. Is something coming up for you now that you think about like you always do because it's like such a solid way to work with a patient that's not like directly hands-on work?
Yeah, totally. And this is shifting for me a lot too, because I'm 12 months in of a 15-month long quantum spine school program where I'm learning how to do work in the energetic field. So things are shifting a little bit as my tool set is broadening there. But really, it's just enriching what I was already doing and taking the somatic work I was already doing to the next level. And things like grounding, like bringing people into a guided meditation, maybe a guided relaxation. I have some exercises that really support down training of the nervous system, working with the vagus nerve, working with the hip flexors to bring safety and calm into the body. I might just do somatic coaching, the process we teach in somatic pelvic arts to guide them into their body, into sensation, into exploring what they might be holding. That might be a first few sessions.
Yeah, just really guiding them into, because sometimes patients feel like their whole pelvis is on fire, for example, or whatever. And they might see something that's like, that's really an alarming way to describe something, but sometimes they'll see that, right? And that may be the truth. They may be feeling like that. But sometimes when you guide them into the body and really help them map where they're feeling pain, what color is it, how big is it, does it have a shape, does it have a density, does it have a temperature, the patient really starts to be able to visualize and name this thing that has felt like so nebulous, so huge, like such a kind of a monster. And they start to realize that it's maybe smaller than they thought, maybe a little bit different. And then they begin to relate to this and integrate this as a part of themselves. So many times patients with pain, it's like this thing that has taken over their body, but it's not them. So it really allows that somatic work really allows them to integrate and own that, oh, like this is my body. I have control over this thing. And like Tara said, we teach this kind of work in our mentorship program. And it's because we know that the patients need it. And this is how we start with patients instead of doing that classic PT work that we were trained to do. We start with this because we realize that the patients, they don't really know what's going on inside of them.
Yeah, they're so disconnected because when you have pain, especially pain in your pelvis, but really pain anywhere in your body, that disconnects you. You don't want to sit and feel the pain. Or some people really do, that you're almost like too in the pain, which like takes you out of being able to locate and feel any other sensation in your body. So it's either this like disassociation trying to escape and avoid it, or it's this I'm so focused on this that I can't even see anything else. My nervous system is just here in this spot, locked in survival
That's a really good
at this
point.
location.
That it's not always that the sensation is not always a disassociation that they need to bring into the body and integrate and feel, but rather sometimes it's the total opposite of that, like this defining thing that becomes them, like it becomes your personality.
And I think this is maybe a little bit off topic, but it's coming up because of what you just said. And I think it's really important to bring here is that often what happens when, say, you have chronic pain or say you get a diagnosis, I'm seeing this a lot with women thinking they have ADHD or autism or getting these diagnoses later in life, or even with like hypermobility syndrome and EDS, I see this. It's right. It's like you are going
Which is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome for people who don't know that.
yeah, and yes. You're like living your life, you're going through, you start having some pain, or maybe something always has been off about you, but like you're going through your life, and then maybe something happens and it gets to the point where now you start having more pain and your functioning is declining. And then you go and you do all of this research, you start looking on the internet, you're like, oh my gosh, I think I might have this. I think I might have this. I think I might have this. And then it starts becoming part of your identity. And so then you're like, oh, now I'm a person who has this. I'm a person who has chronic pain. I'm a person who has ADHD. I'm a person who has EDS. And then you like spiral in further into this identity and actually like taking on the energetics of whatever that thing is even more. And then you're like becoming it. I've seen this so much where people get mentally attached to the diagnosis and it just like snowballs from there.
Hey, Dr. Tara taking a break from the podcast as Ryan and I have something we are so excited to offer you. Do you ever have those clients whose symptoms just don't make sense? We get it. We've been there, and because of that, we found a new way. Join us for Pelvic PT's Gone Wild office hours. 3 free live workshops where we'll unpack your real client cases and show you how we approach them through a somatic pelvic arts perspective. You can submit your cases ahead of time, and together we'll break them down, offering practical frameworks and fresh insight you can bring straight back into your sessions. Save the dates November 3rd, December 1st, and January 12th. We look forward to seeing you at one, and maybe, if we're lucky, all 3. Register through the link in the show notes at somaticpelvicarts.com/office hours. Bring your curiosity and your toughest cases. We can't wait to dive in with you. Now let's get back to the podcast.
It feels like a way to find purpose or belonging in something that can be isolating and alienating. And I think that's a really interesting thing just to highlight in terms of the nervous system is freaking out and looking for something to attach itself to where it doesn't feel alone and it doesn't feel scared. And so it's, oh, if I could just define this specifically, if I could just find my people who also have this, if I could just sit comfortably in a group where I don't have to be alone in my experience. I think that the truth is, though, really, is that you're not alone in the experience and that all of us have asymmetries and all of us have pain at some time in our life and all of us deal with these elements. And it's just that we keep them quiet or we don't talk about them or we suffer in silence. So many women with pelvic pain and sexual trauma and abuse as young girls, like suffering in silence for years and years and not knowing how to, how to come forward with things that are so like deeply scary. And so, this like defining yourself as your diagnosis sometimes it feels like a way to find belonging or safety in what you're dealing with.
And I think it does for a moment in time. I think it does. It's, oh my gosh, I feel so much better because I can label this thing.
Yeah.
But then it's like in that labeling, then that leads to like more and more searching outside of yourself actually for the answer. And so they're seeking outside of themselves instead of actually, what does it mean to actually return to myself, to return to wholeness, to remember that I do belong innately because I am existing. I'm a human existing here on this planet. And this might even be a good topic for a whole nother podcast because I really think it's like such a big, loaded discussion.
Yeah. I also think these are also opportunities to discuss lifestyle and the way that we're living our life and the way that is contributing to our pain, our diagnoses and things like that. I think something that Tara and I do a lot of, which again, is not really, like Tara said earlier, it's not really common to be like discussing your personal life with your doctor, right? So often it's just totally ignored. If you're a single mom of 3 kids who's working like 3 jobs, or you're a school teacher who is dealing with lockdowns and like the threat of your elementary school children being safe or unsafe, like these stressful parts of our current modern world are really having an impact on our capacity to handle physical pain, to recover from physical pain, to feel safe in our own systems and our own places of work and our own bodies. There's so much happening around women's right to choose and abortion and all of this stuff. And all of these things, they culminate and they hold space in our bodies, and they make it a lot less easy to sometimes heal or let go of some of the things, some of the pain we're feeling inside of our body, because we're also holding these real lifestyle, quality of life pieces in our tissues, in our cells, in our bodies as we just walk through the world.
Yeah. And our body does a beautiful job of holding all of that for us. And our body, it does, it takes on and it holds everything that we don't have the capacity to feel all the way through. And I think that's another aspect that's important here because the body is holding on to everything that you don't have the capacity to process every single day. Every single day, our body and our spine is just like holding, our nervous system is holding all of these things for us. Right. And if we don't have practices to come back to our body, if we don't have spaces, safe spaces to come back and actually feel what we're holding in the body and to release what we're holding in the body, then over time that builds up, and builds up and builds up. And then that creates pain and exhaustion and all of these things. Right. And that's where I think the answer is less in like seeking these more external things, but it is really coming back and learning how to feel and process what the body's holding and how to integrate in practices regularly that support the nervous system and the body in unwinding. Right.
Yeah. And we used to be more in tune and in touch with with metabolizing real traumas. So we used to do ceremony. We used to do drum circle. We used to do fire. We used to do singing. We used to do dancing. And they were all communal, right? So you didn't feel like alone or weird or whatever when there was like a death in the tribe. You're all together processing and mourning and doing it together. And again, like I love this word like metabolizing, because that's what our liver and our kidneys and our gut, these are the ways that our organs deal with the toxins, the physiologic toxins in our body. The dancing and the singing and the drumming and the being with your community and being able to really express yourself, to metabolize and move the stuff that otherwise would be like, maybe you would be like frozen in sorrow. But if you actually move voice through your throat and sing, then that breaks up all these pieces inside of your body that you're holding. And a lot of us have our own practices. We exercise, people run, people go out and dance for the night, people drink alcohol, people are doing things the way they know how. So it's not like nobody's doing anything. But with pelvic care in particular, it's hard to know what to do to metabolize stuff that's stuck in your pelvis. I think it's just not a really common thing to just walk around and shake your pelvis or move your pelvis in figure eight. And for all kinds of reasons, we don't want to do that in public. But this metabolizing and completing the circuit of that the neurons need to complete. I always use the example of when you see when your dogs get really stressed out and they have a stress for a moment. And then when they're done feeling stressed, they just do a whole spinal shake from cervical spine all the way to the tip of their tail. That's that nervous system release that we never get.
Yeah.
Like you may be in like the boardroom having a meeting and some man may have mansplained you for 25 minutes and made you, and you're just like, you just have to hold it. And
Yeah.
like your rage, your emotion, your sadness, your disappointment, you can't stand up after the meeting and just be like, "Whoa."
That was literally, oh my God, I have two funny examples of that this week. So I just this past weekend spent 4 days in the Californian Redwoods, the last retreat for Quantum Spine School. And so my spine was just like so delicious. It still is pretty delicious, but like I just felt so good and liberated in my body. And I went to my workout with my trainer, Kelly, on Monday, and it's like a group class. And like after every single lift, I was like basically doing that. I was like, "Ooh," like, it's just like, it's just like, what is
Don't
up
get
with you? And I'm like, oh my God, I just have to move everything through my body. I was like such that dog that I was doing my deadlifts and then shaking it out. And I'm like, I think we actually need to encourage people to do this in their rest break. This is what our body needs.
But what's valued? Like
But
being
totally.
being tight, nothing jiggling, nothing shaking, not all rigidity.
Rigidity.
And it's not good for your spine. In fact, if you think about it, when you get stressed and tense, everybody knows you just like immediately hold rigidity in your body. When you're relaxed and you feel good and safe, there's flow. And so often we're trying to reestablish this flow in people's bodies, and they might not even know that they're holding themselves rigid. And again, like when we were talking about what do you do with your patients in the beginning, so if you're not going to do hands-on stuff, this is like beautiful,
Yeah.
fun. If you can get out of your head and put on some music and do a big shake with one of your patients and dance it out a little bit,
Yeah.
that's so fun. And it feels good. So patients are likely to come back. That's the other thing, is that when things feel good, when you start with like squishy, delicious stuff with your patients in the beginning, they want to come back for more of that. And I think sometimes we're trying to like work that a little to get the buy-in, to get the trust, and also that they're paying for something that like feels good, like a yoga class or something like that.
Yeah. I feel like it's always really for me, at least a balancing act of what do they really need? What is the thing that's going to help them feel like seen and heard and understood? And I've got them. And then bringing in those tools that might feel like they're not doing anything. Or maybe it takes 20 to 30 minutes of their time to do one exercise for their nervous system. And that's hard for them to fit that in. But I see a clear difference at clients when I give them my nervous system reset and they commit to doing it multiple times a week. They get so much better, so much faster than the ones that are like, I don't have time to lay on the floor for 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that it's like, you really do. We all have time for things.
If you
But we
don't
all
have
have
time to lay on the
times.
floor for 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes we have to get real with our people and we have to be like,
Yeah,
then you're not going to get better. So what do you want to do? Do you want to get better or not? And I think that's another, when I was talking about how we're getting older and it helps us treat our patients better. I think too, sometimes you have to be real and a little tough love in some ways and just be like, look, I want you to get better, but you're not going to get better this way. And sometimes it takes me 4 or 5 sessions to actually say that.
totally. Of
I'm
course.
not like saying it right away, but it's one of those things you got to hold people accountable too for their own health and well-being. And that's another piece of this that I think is really important because so many of us are burned out working with patients that have such trouble sticking to the program or just find it difficult, the healing process difficult. It's hard on us.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. It's a lot to take care of yourself. I know I'm not always the best patient and
Yeah, me either.
I strive to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to find the time to fit things in and get that. Sometimes people come to, and I think this is why so many providers are burnt out because so many people come into physical therapy or pelvic floor physical therapy thinking, okay, this person's going to fix me. They're going to do the things for me. They're going to do the manual work and this is going to make me feel better. And really, what we do is such a small part of what's going to actually help their body heal. What I, at least the way I work and how I feel, is that my job when they're here is to get their body into a place where their body can heal itself. And if someone's just coming in and I'm giving them some core exercises and like a little manual therapy, but I'm not doing anything to support their nervous system, I'm not actually doing my job of putting their body in a healing state, because then they're just going to go into their life. And if they don't have anything to support their body coming into a healing state, if they're just going back into survival mode, they're not going to get better. And that's where it's like, we can only do so much in the time we have with them. And also the way they are showing up for their care plan in their life also really matters in the progress that they can make. So it really has to be, I think you said this in the beginning, it has to be a partnership of I'm showing up to serve you in this way. And this is how you're stepping up to serve your own life and to serve your liberation from the pain that you're feeling. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we all know that like therapeutic exercise is super important and the manual therapy is really important. I think what we're really trying to say is like, where and when do you put that in? And being like knowing where and when to put that in comes from listening to our own intuition. And we have learned what our own intuition is by doing the somatic work ourselves. So that's a really big piece of our somatic mentorship training, is a lot of going inside yourself to feel and track your own body. Because once you can track your own body, you can really read your patient's bodies better, and you can decide what your plan of care trajectory looks like. Tara and I for sure prescribe exercise and all kinds of more vigorous or active things. But we just know what patients we can put that in right away and what patients we need to take time. And that's like reading the sensitivity of their nervous system. And often that's by really sitting face to face with a patient and grounding with them and working in the somatic experience with them. And we do guide all of our mentees that take this program, we guide them through these processes of becoming an anchor for your patient so that you can then really tap in and feel what the patient is feeling. And so that's
Because it really does, it really does begin with you as a practitioner being able to, one, get out of your head, and your head being the thing that's like driving the treatment, and coming back. And to me, it feels like leaning in and dropping into my body and really trusting my intuition, trusting my channel that is also guiding me, and really being led by that. Right. Which is, it's a process. It's a practice of, I've spent probably the last 7 years, like consciously, oh, here I am. I'm in my head again. Okay, I got to go back out. Oh,
yeah,
it's like a
totally.
process. It's not a one day I got it. Like I've been practicing this for 5 to 7 years, and I still have moments where I catch myself getting mental and having to come back and drop back in and slow down. And if I create some space, what's going to come in here?
When
Right.
I
And that
watch
to
you
me,
do it, yeah, when I watch you do that, it makes me think of the pattern that we see in so many patients with like knee pain, for example, where it's like just their quads are so on and their head is so in front of their body. And this is like modern society, right? It just drives this
yeah.
whole frontal plane pattern.
Yeah.
And when I watched you sit back, I just think this will be relatable for people who do orthopedics and things. Like when you sit back, you sit on your sit bones, you feel your erector spinae light up. Your hamstrings might actually work then. Your glutes might actually work then. But it's that I think so many of us for years have been pulling people backwards into this pattern. And that like posterior side, lighting that up, that starts to bring online that intuitive part of your body rather than that like thinking, doing.
Survival.
Yeah, feels more primal, feels more relaxed, feels more connected to the earth, and then connected to your patient, like through the mycelium, like down into the soil and up through them. Yeah. And of course, there's a lot to say about all of those interwoven networks. So I think Tara, working in quantum spine school and I've done a lot of this work too. It's just like we understand the interconnectedness of us with our patient, us with nature, us with all of these other dimensions that are moving. If we can tap into this, and we talk about this in our mentorship program, if you can tap into that universal consciousness, if you can tap into some of the wisdom that lies outside of our thinking brain, but is just like inside of our human system because of like generations and generations of intelligence, if you can tap into that a little bit, it lightens your load and things become really creative and interesting and
Easy, easeful.
yeah. And easier. And yeah, like when you finish seeing a difficult, like someone who's had a difficult time, like you might even be smiling at the end of your session rather than walking out and just being like, shit, I don't know if I did anything for them.
I had this really beautiful discovery call the other day with someone who had she's seen all the doctors, pain doctors, taken all of the different pain medication, multiple physical therapists, regular pelvic PTs, regular PTs. And I was just like, I don't know if I can help this person. Like, can I actually help this person? Was my question going into it. And so I wanted to get really clear on if I could, because they've done everything. They've tried energy work, they've tried all of the things that most people think of trying. And so I actually led them through a meditation. And one of the things they were telling me when we were talking was that they're disconnected from their emotions. They have autism. And so they can't feel the emotion that's present until 5 days later they can like process and realize, oh, I was actually sad when that was happening. And so I led them into this meditative space and actually working into that universal consciousness and bringing that in through. And they were able to actually connect to the pain that they located in their body was actually tied to anger and frustration in that moment.
What?
And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Like
nice.
you just told me it normally takes you 5 days. And here you just connected to this clenching in your
Yeah.
jaw and this anger that you're feeling.
Like I'm mad.
Then I was able to mirror. Did you know that your jaw is a reflection of your pelvis?
Totally. Yeah.
They were like, no one's ever told me that before.
Wow. Yeah. It's just,
Like,
and everybody listening to this that's a PT is that's so simple. And you're like, yeah, it is simple.
if you have the right tools.
So, like
yeah.
the concept of jaw and pelvis being related
Yes.
and being
But like,
able to
and
help
also,
someone
why has
feel
this
that they're
person not
going
heard
to
that?
clench their jaw when they're mad.
Yeah.
Duh, that's
Uh,
such a thing. Like,
know
of course
that.
it is. But being able to slow down a patient enough that they can feel that in their own body, that's the key. That's where the courage came from you was like, I know this person, we just need to sit down together and slow down enough for them to see what's happening. That's the intelligence in their own body. We're coming to the end of our time. And this is, even if this session talk seems like a little meandering, coming back to this beautiful piece of intelligence that is slow down enough and trust yourself enough to bring yourself back into your sit bones, get grounded enough into yourself that you know that you have this intuitive intelligence that can help your patients and that you do not need to use all of the tools in the way that the system has created the scaffolding for you. You can be creative. You can be different. You can not jump too fast too soon, and you can slow down. And we want to offer you all too that we're going to do some office hours so that you guys can see how we're working with this kind of material. And we are going to offer a mentorship program, like I said, soon in a couple of months. And so we want you to feel confident that if you did come on board with that mentorship program, that you know how we work. And so what we want to do is bring some of difficult cases, things that you've come across that you've had difficulty understanding or working with your patients. We want to talk that out with you. And we want to talk that out as a group. Hopefully we have a nice cohort of people that are interested in joining, largely PT professionals is what we're thinking. And that you can send some of your cases in to us ahead of time and that we can choose a few and talk them through in some office hours. I think it'd be really cool to see how these plans of care might evolve over time.
And I want to add just one tiny little tidbit and then we'll tie a little bow on all of this. so often as providers, right? We talked about our clients seeking outside of themselves, right? And then what do we do as like passionate providers that really want to help our clients? We're like constantly seeking like this class, that class, this tool, this thing. I'm guilty of it. I'm just finishing another energetic training, which really feels in alignment with my soul's path, and not that I'm grasping for another tool. But I think we have to understand when we start to drop in, when we start to get connected to our spines and grounded and like this relationship with the earth and the universe and trusting ourselves, we also move from seeking the courses and the tools outside of ourselves and we drop into our intuition. And then the tools that we have, that's all we need. We can do so much because it's actually not about the tools, aren't what's actually supporting your client's nervous system. It's you showing up grounded, embodied, centered, holding this space and listening to their body in a way that no one else has listened to it. That is the healing magic. It has nothing to do with your skill set. And you
Well,
have
you
enough
have a
skills. Like
great
you
skill
have
set.
enough
Yeah,
skills.
you have it.
Obviously, you do
Do.
have to have some skills, but it's not about
But you do.
grabbing and needing more skills, right? And
Yeah, you have the
that's
base
the beauty.
foundation. It's just like growing that skill set into an intuitive healing space.
And it's
So
that same process that you go through of learning to connect to your body and build safety in yourself to do that. Those are the skills that you need to teach your client to come back into connection with themselves so they can begin unwinding. And so it's really like through you and your process and your own evolution that can guide your clients in this way. And that is what we teach in our mentorship. And yeah, I'm really excited about these group calls that we're going to have where we can support you all in thinking through and feeling through some more challenging cases. So we'll be sharing more soon.
those of you who also feel like pelvic PT's gone wild, we'll see you soon.
Woo.
Thank you again for listening to the Pelvic PT's Gone Wild podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and send to your pelvic health bestie too, because getting wild is way better together. You can also follow us over on Instagram at Somatic Pelvic Arts to see what we are getting into over there. Catch you on the next episode, and remember, it's okay to step out of the box and be a little wild. We're here cheering you on.